The entire concept of the Polar Express is built around sound, and we get it even from the very first line where the narrator emphasizes the importance of sound.
On Christmas Eve, many years ago, I lay quietly in my bed. I was listening for a sound I was afraid I'd never hear.
This pattern continues throughout the entire rest of the film. The audio is always important, and it's being used to get us into the internal world of the hero boy and let us know exactly what's going on in his arc. It's fascinating, and it's one of the reasons The Polar Express has always been one of my favorite Christmas movies. So my question for today is, what did the filmmakers do with their sound design that made this scene in particular such a gut-wrenching emotional experience? And why do I cry every single year I watch this film? Hi, my name is Lindsay. Happy holidays, everybody. And if you couldn't tell, I think I'm starting to become one of the most widely credited YouTubers on the platform, so thank you guys so much for that. If you have somehow never heard of me, I do invite you to hit subscribe because you're kind of missing out. No, but seriously, I love to debate film analysis with like-minded people. Subscribe, leave me a like, a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm aware that The Polar Express isn't everyone's favorite Christmas movie, so feel free to tell me why that is. I'm just excited to explain to you why I personally really enjoy it. So without further ado, let's take a look at The Polar Express. Now, when we're analyzing sound, we have several different things we can look at. Number one is the dialogue, and before you go saying, oh, the dialogue is not really part of sound, wouldn't that fall into the writing category? First off, when I'm talking about dialogue here, I'm focused more on the voices of the characters, but just so you know, the words they say actually are a part of the sound of the film, at least according to my Film 102 professor. I also just love recurring lines, so I'll probably touch on at least one of those, but I do want to get to other elements, so it won't be long. Number two is the sound effects, as you could probably guess, and I'm also going to talk a little about something in this category called the absence of sound, and how that works to create ambiance and help us understand the internal journey of the character. Number three is, of course, the music. This category is also going to be split into two parts, but we'll talk about that when we get there. And as we go through all these different categories, I want to talk about the specific effects each one has on the story, so that when we take a look at the climactic sequence of the film, we can really just dissect how all these things come together to deliver the perfect emotional hit to the audience. So now that we've summarized the key points, let's jump right into our part one, dialogue.
But sometimes seeing is believing. And sometimes the most real things in the world are the things we can't see.
So of course, when I say the voices of the characters, we gotta talk about the elephant in the room, namely their decision to use Tom Hanks in every single role in this film, which I've seen a lot of people trying to crack the case on what this means for like the canon lore of the story, but for me, it's less about that than just what effect did they want to have on the audience by making this artistic decision. I'm less interested in, does this mean the hero boy was dreaming all of this up? In fact, I think that's actually better left in mystery, like many other aspects of this film. What I want to really focus on is what kind of experience do we get from this film because all of the characters have the same voice. And I think it's highlighting the fact that this movie is a very internal, very personal journey. The hero boy is going through something that I think a lot of people go through in their lives, if not everyone who's ever grown up, and that is he's experiencing a reevaluation of his identity and trying to come to grips with just losing the way he used to feel and the things he used to believe. And that's a really deeply rooted feeling and something that's hard to explain and express outwardly, even from the perspective of the person who's feeling it. So their decision to have all the outside characters reflect the same voice as the adult version of the main character, it's all in an effort to really get us inside the head of this main character. And keep that in mind because you won't believe how consistent that theme is across the sound design of this film. Also, with regard to those recurring lines, I just think it's cool that this line,
"Are you sure?"
kind of looks like it's there to lead us to some reveal about the girl's backstory, but it never really does. It's one of the wonderful things in this movie that is left completely unexplained in a way that really leaves you wanting more, which thematically it goes along perfectly with their soft magic system, but it's also a perfect summary of what the boy is going through at this point and how unsure he is of everything in his life. So now that we've got the dialogue out of the way, there's one type of sound in this film that seems very deliberately put there because you really wouldn't necessarily think of these types of sound being present in the North Pole of all places. But this movie decides to portray the North Pole as surprisingly mechanized, which I think is a perfect fit for the tone and the emotional journey of the film. Mechanical sounds are inherently associated with kind of emotionless, lifeless, cold-hearted things. Robots aren't exactly known for nurturing their young.
Nothing says mother's love like a giant robotic platypus butt.
So this choice to include a lot of mechanical sounds not only matches the aesthetic of the train perfectly, it also reinforces the apathy and emotionlessness that I think the hero boy is feeling toward Christmas, where he's lost his belief and conviction, and that makes him feel like he's lost meaning. Maybe where he used to feel a lot of excitement and joy at Christmas time, now he's having trouble recapturing that same feeling, and it's so subtle here with the mechanical sounds, but it works so well in my opinion. Beyond that, there's also a scene near the start of the film that takes the meaning of the mechanical sounds to an even deeper level, and that's when we see this mechanical Santa Claus stacking gifts in a shop window. Not only do the mechanical sounds represent being devoid of emotion, but this scene also associates them with just being straight up scammed. A mechanical sham dressed up as something magical that's meant to make you believe things that aren't true. That's how the hero boy sees Santa Claus, and that may be why there are so many machines in the North Pole and so many mechanical sounds in that environment. Because the boy has internally come to associate all of this with being deceived. It all seems so magical, but through his eyes, it's all just a bunch of nuts and bolts.
I want to believe, but...
But
You don't want to be bamboozled. You don't want to be led down the primrose path. Have the wool pulled over your eyes. Hoodwinked. You don't want to be taken for a ride. Railroaded.
So the emotionlessness coupled with the idea that it's all a big trick are both meant to get us deeper into the head of this character and help us figure out what his emotional state is and what kinds of things he needs to learn from this experience.
Yes, I hear it.
I hear it too.
I don't hear anything. Okay, it's down this way.
So now let's talk about the absence of sound. And obviously we have the big one, the absence of the sound of the bells. But there are other ways silence comes into play in this film, and they're all orchestrated in a very particular way to make us as the audience feel creeped out. I was actually a little surprised when I realized this, although in hindsight it seems like it should have been more obvious. As a kid, I always just kind of thought of the creepy aspect of this film as being totally accidental, that maybe they didn't have good enough technology back then to avoid the uncanny valley. But the deliberate creative choices in this film are clearly set up to make us creeped out, and to be honest, that really makes me appreciate this film all the more, that they really seem to have embraced the unsettlingness of it all and leaned into the vibe of a scary Christmas ghost story. Like, for example, as they're walking around the North Pole, there's a distinct absence of the sounds of civilization. Even though it looks like we're in a place where there should be a lot of those sounds, the sounds of people walking down the street, doors opening and closing, maybe a buzz of background conversation or traffic, because the elves are all elsewhere, none of that is happening. We only get the sounds made by the main characters. And the extremely And the extremely uncanny music playing over the outdated speaker system, which is another thing we'll get to in a minute. And because we're in a place where it looks like all those sounds should be happening, but they aren't, it kind of leads to us not quite knowing what to expect. We feel like the rug's been pulled out from under our feet, and there's almost a tension in the air, like the kind you expect to feel in a horror movie. But I do want to keep in mind that it's not too overdone. It all just kind of leaves you with a slight chill down your spine that you're not even sure is supposed to be there, and I think that subtle fear is another way they're bringing us into the boy's internal world. This is a way of acknowledging that it's scary to lose your beliefs when you don't know what to think or which of your feelings to trust, and you're wondering if you'll ever feel anything again. That's pretty terrifying, and the Polar Express really leans into the dark side of that, which just makes me love it all the more. So the music in this film is split up into two parts, and the distinction is important because of their completely different emotional functions in the story. And those parts are the diegetic music and the non-diegetic music. And when we talk about something being diegetic in film, it means that it's canon in the world of the film. The characters can see, hear, or otherwise interact with it somehow. Non-diegetic elements refers to things that the characters can't see, hear, or interact with, so like the score, for example. And the diegetic music in this film is another element of the sound that's clearly there to creep us out because it's consistently distorted and echoes around a place that's utterly devoid of human life, almost as if just put there to disguise its emptiness. One effective way to get someone to feel creeped out is to just take something that's familiar to them and just slightly alter it somehow so that it's not quite what it's supposed to be. And that's what this music is doing. It's taking familiar Christmas songs and twisting them to make you feel off your game, but it's also a reflection of how the boy is feeling as well. How he's reevaluating things that used to be familiar to him, and how these old familiar Christmas songs don't come with the same emotion behind them. At one point, the audio even seems to glitch, and this is a point where the music and the sound effects come together to remind you that this is all playing on a system. It's mechanical and it doesn't have any living human origins. But even with all of this being communicated, this is not where the music stops. So now let's talk about the non-diegetic music and how it has a complete opposite effect on the story. So there's one specific theme I want to point out for this video, and that's the first few notes of this. And I'm not sure if this theme has its own name, but I've thought of one that I think is fitting because it seems to play whenever something particularly emotional or magical happens. And that's the magic theme. Whereas the music the characters can hear is put there to throw us off our balance and make us feel like everything's not as it should be, the magic theme comes in to save the day. It brings emotions back into a scene and it reminds us that the feelings we had before are still there, just hiding under the surface. It plays when Billy finds his Christmas gift and when the train is magically able to move again because one of the engineers speaks caribou for some reason. And the emotion it brings into a scene oftentimes hits all the harder because of the emotionlessness and the lack of humanity present in the scenes around it, mostly due to the lack of human sounds and the mechanical sound effects. All of these elements come together just beautifully in the climax of the film, so let's not waste another minute, let's dig into that right now. So first, we start off with a fanfare, and even though this is not distorted in the same way as the rest of the music, it's still very much there to make us feel unsettled. It's an example of what we call contrapuntal music, which is music that presents a huge contrast in tone to the scene that's playing around it. The fanfare is loud, it's brassy, it sounds triumphant, which is the exact opposite of what the boy is feeling in this moment. He's actually feeling slightly distressed, and that gets worse as he recognizes that he can't hear the bells.
Aren't those bells the most beautiful sound?
He's frustrated that he can't do something, and that's a far cry from being triumphant. Contrapuntal music can be used for a lot of different effects, but here it's deliberately placed to make us feel disturbed, as a happy facade with something much darker behind it would do. After the fanfare stops, we have this brief moment of silence before by far the most unsettling part of this movie begins. The elves start to sing, and from this point on is where things get really creepy sounding, and I know as a kid this used to be the stuff of nightmares, but it's all very purposeful. The filmmakers could have chosen to have the elves just magically stay in tune. This movie is actually a musical after all, kinda. But no, they decided to have them struggle to find the opening note and then really lean into how a real crowd of thousands would sound if they all started trying to sing an unrehearsed Christmas song. They have to sing very slowly, and again this plays into the distortion we've been dealing with earlier. It echoes around what seems to be a large empty space, and this could be reflective of the emotional emptiness the boy is experiencing in his life. And it all just makes us feel creeped out, unsettled, and like we don't know what's coming next. So after this sickening rumble ends, we have another moment of silence followed by a loud echoing bang and a cheer. And these moments of silence in between are important as well. They mean there's no score playing under this. In a moment where one could have served to make the scene very emotional, or like the boy's been waiting for this all along, they decided to save that emotional payoff for later in order to preserve the continuity of the boy's character arc. Anyway, soon after the cheer, we start to get more of the diegetic music from before. But this time, the distortion goes way out of hand. The music starts to slow down and we get a lot of reverb. And there are other sounds compounded on top of it as well. We get a slow heartbeat and the elves' muffled shouting. But of course, we still can't hear the bells, and as time goes on, we start to get the absence of other sounds as well. The elves' shouting fades away, and at this point, we are entirely immersed in the boy's internal world. It's like he's the only one there. There are absolutely no other characters involved in this interaction. It's just him confronting the fact that he doesn't believe, he doesn't feel, he doesn't care the way he used to. And that fact is terrifying. The music is now at its slowest, and the slowed vibrato causes it to sound super off-key and unsettling. It kind of gives you a chill up your spine, like you're being crept up on from behind. And again, it's reflecting the fact that the boy's worldview is being turned inside out. He's unsettled by the idea that he doesn't believe. And then the music stops, and the boy raises the bell up to his ear, trying his best to hear it one more time. But all we get is this nearly unintelligible whisper that if you listen to it a bit closer, you realize is a repeat of something the hobo guy said to the boy earlier.
You're a doubter!
The word doubter repeated over and over again with this weird echo on it. So the boy says a few lines which also seem to echo in a big empty space, and then when he raises the bell up to his ear for a second time, all of the other sounds fade away, and there's no heartbeat, there's no elves, there's no diegetic or non-diegetic music, it's just the boy and the bell, which makes the fact that he can hear it feel like the most important thing in the universe. We've been here with him in his internal world, and to him this is a huge moment. This is where he finally remembers the joy of Christmas he felt in his past, not the doubts, not the fears. He's regained the magic, he's regained that conviction, and it's a moment of pure emotional relief for him as well as the audience. And of course, that's when they bring in the magic theme, right at the moment when we realize the most magical fact of all, that you can truly believe in something you can't see. After such a wrenching sequence, hearing the magic theme has basically the effect of a wrecking ball on a row of dominoes. It's so impactful to hear that music reaffirming to us that even when we feel like all emotion and conviction is lost, and even when we're terrified by the unknown, there's still magic in the love and human connection that comes with the Christmas season, and it makes me cry every time.
Come on, kids, we don't want to be late.
My mind is boggled by the way the Polar Express uses sound to tell a deeply introspective story, one about regaining passions and beliefs you may have lost in the past, and I think that's something that everyone can relate to. The sound designers got us into the mind of the main character using inhuman sound effects like machinery, the absence of sound where it felt like there should have been sound, and the distortion of familiar tunes, and the score was used only in the most effective moments possible to help us feel the emotions the hero boy was feeling. And all that is why the Polar Express is a masterpiece, at least audio-wise. So please, let me know, what are your guys' opinions on this? Have you gained an appreciation for sound and film? Because I know I have. Never stop learning, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.